So I've always been interested in the idea of perpetual computing or ubiquitous computing, which is the other term. Going back to the days when we used to speak about the Internet of Things, where basically computing is everything everywhere. All things are computing in some form. In fact, a very, very long time ago, two things. A very long time ago, I created Uber long before Uber. I mean, I didn't create it. I thought about it. I'm sure many, many people did. Standing on Whale Street and imagining that a car, a ghost car is what I called it in my head, would just arrive almost out of the ether and collect me. And it was based on the notion that the computing is so ubiquitous that it kind of already predicts my need and puts a mechanism in place to meet that need at the point at which it arrives. And I mean, Uber has come pretty close to that. So I think that I need a vehicle, and whoop, almost out of the ether, out of nothing, a car arrives, I jump in and off I go, right? Ghost cars. Wish I'd done something about it. But anyway, if we acted on all ideas, all we'd be doing is leaving a museum of unfinished projects, right? You've got to act on the ones that are the most likely, in most cases, maybe. The other one was, and I still believe that this is going to be the case, all computing tends towards zero eventually. So that there will be no physical computing infrastructure that you have in your hand anymore. Whatever you have in your hand is basically of no significant value. So you would go to the corner cafe to pick up a loose cigarette, a samosa, and I don't know, some sweets. And on the counter are what would basically appear to be A4 paper pages, but they're digital paper, right? And so if you need an interface, they're so cheap that they're basically for free. You just take that thing, your identity is just a thumbprint away, because these devices now, they can read your thumbprint, and then that turns it into a computing device with your identity. You can interact, and basically it's disposable. You use it, and then you dispose of it, or you roll it up and you keep it for later. But basically the technology moves to a point where it becomes absolutely disposable, which is, on the one hand a problem because you end up with lots of waste. But I think at this point that waste is no longer an issue. Everything becomes regenerative in some form, biodegradable, right? Costs so little energy to create it, and equally almost no energy for it to become back into the ecosystem, right? So now we are definitely heading in that direction. The reference for this then is the release yesterday by Snap Incorporated of their Snap specs. Now, I've never used any of the Snap services. Specifically Snapchat. I've got no interaction with it, no idea. But I have been kind of following where they've been heading, and you could see for a while that they've been heading into ubiquitous computing. So now they've got Snap Specs. The Specs is a computing device, a wearable computing device. You wear it on your face. It's a pair of glasses. You can get it with your prescription lenses, whatever. It's a very clever device, kind of takes what Meta's done, takes what Apple did with their Vision Pro, puts it into a set of glasses, which I still think like they look a little bit like you're goofy on a date in Miami. It's going to be a while before these things are not particularly goofy. But if you think about where computing is right now, you've got a computer on your eyes, you've got these things which are now becoming computing devices in their own right in your ear with translation and voice prompts that are, like there's computing in your ears now, it's on your eyes. You've probably got a smartwatch of some sort, whether it's Garmin or Fitbit or Apple, you've got something there. You might be wearing a kind of a ring which is tracking your health, etc., etc. So computing is everywhere in a large part. And I think, it's going to ramp up from here. These days, if you're driving an EV, your car is a full-blown computing device. It's a computer on a chassis, right? With lots of data being generated. So, basically computing is everywhere now. And if EVs are anything to go by, the race to zero is definitely upon us. I mean, do we end up in an EV world where you just kind of choose a chassis and you modularly like that Slate car that's coming out now, the Slate utility truck. You have a kind of a utilitarian chassis, and you can upgrade what sits on top of the chassis. So if you want it to be more sporty, you want it to be more family oriented, you basically just upgrade according to your needs. So a modular mobility. The chassis stays the same, the power output stays the same, but the features on top of it kind of are able to be plug and play. That's a very interesting future. So ubiquitous computing. Now, then you also know that the kind of the next level of ubiquitous computing is something like the Neuralink, which I mentioned previously, one of Elon Musk's initiatives, which is terrifying for me, because now suddenly the computing is hardwired into your brain. And so, yeah, okay, so let me leave that bit there. But if you think about this from the point of view of consciousness, everything is a computing instrument. Nature, us, everything is some sort of computational device. You could interpret it at that. It is emitting and dealing with data. It's working energetically, and all we're really doing in the computing space is trying to get to the point where we are so deeply connected to absolutely everything around us that we become indistinguishable as individual entities. We just become part of the whole. It's really interesting for me how all of these things that we create as human beings are tending towards one point. They're trying to take us towards one point. So do technology and spirituality at some point reach the same destination? What are the spiritual implications of the way that computing is evolving? There's so much subtext with the way that computing is evolving around this desire to become superhuman, which is also terrifying. It's a very, very beautiful day where I am. All right, I'm going to leave these random thoughts right there.